Hello, and welcome to Wellness Wednesday with 3W. Wellness Wednesday is sponsored by 3W Medical for Women, a nonprofit medical clinic offering free of charge or low-cost reproductive health services to women in the Seattle area, regardless of income or insurance status. 3W does not profit off of the reproductive health choices women make. The information shared in this podcast is the opinion of the speaker or speakers. Medical information is not intended as individual medical consultation, but for general education only. Always consult your own health professional for personalized advice regarding medical decisions. And if you're in the Seattle area, consider making an appointment to consult with us. I'm Helen Nguyen, CEO and co-founder of 3W Medical for Women and the host of today's podcast. Hi there, Wellness Wednesday listeners. Thank you so much for joining us on today's 3W podcast. Today, we're talking to the beautiful Nicole, who's our certified holistic nutritionist. She's been on our podcast before. We had a great time. I had a great time connecting with Nicole. She's remote zooming in from beautiful Spain. Super jealous in this. Today in Seattle, pretty nice, actually. It's a little chilly, but nothing compares to Spain. But she is so gracious to be on our podcast again today. So hi, Nicole. Thank you so much for coming onto our podcast once again.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. Today is going to be a pretty fun topic. I have a plethora of questions for Nicole, but we're going to be talking about menstrual health because we're really big on reclaiming, not being negative Nancy's about our menstruations. There's always this cycle that needs to be broken about looking at our menstruation as this curse or this burden, and it's actually something I think society, we need to readjust our approach in talking about our periods and our menstruation. But I really wanted to pick Nicole's brain on menstruation health and nutrition. And so that's kind of what we're going to be talking about today. So Nicole, before we really dive into that, what are you doing currently? And what's been on your heart and your mind about talking about menstruation, especially when it comes to, because you have your finger on menstruation health in general. So I just wanted to give a moment to you to what's been on your heart today about menstruation in general.
Well, I actually started my period about 10 minutes ago.
Woo! Yay!
So we're having it. Yeah, I'm glad.
Yeah.
It's perfect timing to talk about it.
Perfect.
Yeah. I really appreciate what you said. And I really agree with what you said. And I think a lot of the reason why so many of us look at our cycles and our periods from a negative perspective is because we don't know anything about them, right? Mm-hmm. So we don't understand how these fluctuations in our hormones are really affecting us. And therefore, when we see those negative symptoms arise, we just look at it negatively and we don't know what to do about it. We feel confused. But the incredible thing, and why I'm so grateful that I'm able to do the job that I do, is because the way that you're able to truly connect to yourself when you understand these hormonal fluctuations is so empowering. And, even just understanding it, let alone, of course, what we're going to talk about today a lot is how you can support it. But even just understanding the processes in the body can allow you to give yourself so much more grace and so much more space and so much more confidence. Because I know for myself, like when I didn't know anything about my cycle, I would feel like I was on this roller coaster in the dark that, 1 week I was fine. And then the next week I have brain fog or I'm really irritable and I wouldn't trust myself because it was like, how can I be so stable sometimes? And then at other times I'm so what I would consider unstable. And, once I started to get that understanding of how things were affecting my body, I was able to better prepare and predict for it and just allow to take a step back and recognize that like, oh, hey, maybe these negative thoughts aren't really my reality, but it might just be because my hormones are low and that's affecting my serotonin levels,
Yeah. And understanding all of that makes a huge difference on how you approach menstruation when it comes. But today, I really wanted to focus, since you're this amazing nutritionist, on the insight that you have on menstruation and nutrition. So let's start with the beginning part of your menstruation. Are there signs, or are there things that you can do before your period comes? Are there things you can eat, drink, consume that would help ease you into your period? What is your opinion about that?
Absolutely. Your menstrual cycle is your fifth vital sign.
Mm.
It tells you so many things about your overall health, and the symptoms that you're experiencing are, like you said, signs and a language that your body speaks to you in. And when you're able to understand that language, you can then bring attention to where, it's knocking on the door.
Yeah.
So I think it's also incredible how we need to start also looking at our cycle as our full cycle. And I think a lot of us only see our cycle as our period and maybe the couple days before that we're experiencing PMS.
Yeah.
But our cycle is impacting us every single day, right? So what your actual period is telling you when you're bleeding, you're shedding the endometrium, is it's telling you a lot about the hormonal activity in that previous cycle. So a lot of the things that we need to recognize is what we do earlier in our cycle will directly affect the symptoms that we experience during our PMS stage or our actual period. And so it's really important. I love to focus on phased nutrition, so phase sync nutrition, and focusing on different nutrients that can support the biological process that's happening within each phase. And by doing that, you're able to really help balance your hormones, manage menstrual-related issues, feel so much more confident. You can tailor your work to it. It can help you improve relationships and communication. And it's so incredible, I think, also to realize that, when you're looking at your period from a negative perspective, you're looking at such a massive part of you through a negative lens, and no matter how much healing you do, if you're still looking at your cycle, which, the average person will have 451 menstrual cycles in their life spanning 38.5 years.
Wow.
So that's a massive number. And if it's affecting you every day, then, by shifting the perspective, learning about your cycle, learning how to support it and live in tune with it, the benefits are incredible. And you're not going to be experiencing a lot of those negative symptoms that you previously had.
So what are some tangible advice from you that you could give someone that is dealing with really heavy bleeding, cramping? I know for me personally, I started my period when I was 11, and I had really intense periods starting at age 11, and they were heavy. They lasted for like 7 days. Usually the second and third days are really, really heavy and intense cramping. I had cramps where I fainted on campus one day, and my solution to it at the time was to take copious amounts of ibuprofen, because that was the quick fix kind of situation. Yeah. Later in life, I've learned how to manage it in a more holistic approach. But in the moment, what were some things that if I was one of your clients or something like that, if I looked to you for advice on how to deal with cramping and heavy bleeding and just feeling fatigue, what would you suggest that I could have done preemptively to when I started bleeding?
The different symptoms are going to be telling you different things. So between each person, your symptoms may tell you something else. But let's just take something as easy as, or it's definitely not easy, but as PMS or painful period. There's 5 different types of PMS that each have their own potential causes and natural solutions. So if you understand what type you are, then you can go toward balancing that. So for instance, 80 to 90% of women say that they experience PMS at some point. And of that, about 70% experience PMS type A, and also 70% experience PMS type H. So type A is anxiety. So anxiety, irritability, mood swings, etc. And type H is hyperhydration or water retention. And that can look like tender breasts and general emotional upset, a little bit of weight gain or puffiness. And so one of the potential causes of those two types of PMS, which again, 70% of those who experience PMS are having, that is caused potentially by an imbalance between estrogen and progesterone, right? So estrogen is your dominant hormone in the first half of your cycle, and progesterone is the dominant hormone in the second half of your cycle. And these two hormones work in tandem and affect every different part of your body.
Yeah.
And they need to be balanced and supported differently so that they're in that balance and you're not experiencing those negative symptoms. And, you know, I don't really like quick fixes, of course, because you're not really getting to the root of it. But I like to look at it at a holistic perspective. And I think that phase synced nutrition really supports that because, you know, and we can go through it if you want. We can go through the different phases and how to support each phase specifically, because, you know, as your hormones are really low and your endometrium is shedding during your period, you're losing a lot of iron, which can be causing that fatigue. You know, you're losing a lot of different minerals. Your body, you know, needs a little bit of more assistance digesting food. So, you know, if we focus on the different hormones and how to support those differently throughout each phase, you can really help to reduce pain and PMS symptoms, et cetera.
Let's go back a little bit. PMS, what does it stand for?
Premenstrual syndrome.
Okay. And it's a real thing, right?
Yes, very much so.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Because I remember talking to women in my life and in my community, and some would say, PMS is just in your head. It's something you can totally just switch off.
Absolutely not. Nope. It is your hormone.
Yeah. And I was like very confused about that, because when I was in it, I felt like I was out of control of my reaction, you know, irritability and all of that stuff. And to have someone say, no, it's just in your head, I felt like it was like gaslighting me.
Absolutely. And I think we do that a lot when it comes to menstrual related issues. It's constant gaslighting. And then a lot of the time, because we're dismissed or invalidated by people around us or by healthcare professionals, we then start gaslighting ourselves and we're like, what's wrong with me?
Right. And then you just want a quick fix solution because no one's willing to acknowledge that you're dealing with the situation, because it isn't a situation. And then you kind of like hope it goes away, because no one wants to be around that irritable person, you know, is what you're trying to tell yourself. And that's why you're trying to mask it with these quick fix. Okay. So I'm so glad that you said that, because there's a lot of stereotypes out there that it's like, it's all in your head. PMS is all in your head and you can just get over it. So
no, I can describe what is likely causing a lot of different types of PMS. And
yes. Yeah. You know, please.
If we want to go into
yeah, let's dive into that. What causes PMS? You talked about PMSA and PMSH. What are those different PMS differences in between? Let's dive into that.
Yeah, totally. So there's 5 different types of PMS. So the first is PMS type A, like I said, with anxiety, and it's anxiety, irritability, et cetera. And that's likely caused by the imbalance between estrogen and progesterone, having estrogen being the dominant hormone during that time, which it shouldn't be. And then PMS type C, which is cravings. And that's cravings for things often that are like simple carbs and stuff like that. It can also include headaches. And PMS type C may be caused by an imbalance of like blood sugar dysregulation earlier in your cycle. Then you also have PMS type D, which is depression. And, you know, that comes with insomnia and tons of other negative symptoms. And that may be in relation, again, to that estrogen progesterone balance, but likely that the progesterone might be too high. And I'll mention something a little bit later on about something else too. But we also have PMS type H or type W, which is water retention or hyperhydration.
Okay.
And that is, you know, water retention. So breast swelling, bloating, puffy extremities.
Yeah.
Also comes with just general emotional upset. And that has, you know, too much estrogen in relation to progesterone. And then you have PMS type P, which is pain. And that's where you're experiencing the cramps, the nausea, the back pain. And that can also include painful periods. And, you know, that has a lot of different potential causes. But a lot of inflammation is related to that. And, it's interesting to see because, our hormones are affecting us so intensely. And especially when we're getting those emotional symptoms and we're like, why can't I handle anything?
Yeah.
Well, your reproductive hormones start to drop right before your period and during your period, they're at their lowest point, and that directly affects your neurotransmitters as well. So your serotonin is a little bit lower. You're not getting that happiness boost. You don't have as much motivation. You can have more brain fog. Estrogen and progesterone have different effects on the brain, which is super interesting. And there's been studies that have shown that your brain, so your hypothalamus and your amygdala, can actually change in volume and size based upon the effects of your reproductive hormones and how they're fluctuating throughout your cycle. So, suspected that could have a lot to do with, your memory, your focus, during your ovulatory and your follicular phase, you have a little bit more motivation, energy, clarity. And if we understand also how to use each of those phases, we can use each one and leverage each one to our advantage. And then when it gets to that PMS type part that we always, in the luteal phase, that we often feel a lot more negative, you're able to understand the advantages that you actually have during that time. And just optimize your overall life with it. And at the same time, balancing your hormones.
Can someone have all 5 of those PMS symptoms, or one more dominant than the other, and that's all normal and okay?
Yeah. So usually most people will have 1 or 2 dominant types.
Okay.
I'm A and H for sure, but knowing how to manage those, it's a lot easier. That's why I could be on a podcast, even though it's my first day of my period.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
But yeah, you can have multiple different types, and usually we'll have 1 or 2 more dominant types. But regardless, PMS, although some people deny its existence, it's considered normal. But PMS is not normal. It's a sign that your body is telling you that something's going on and needs attention to it. So PMS is common, but it is not normal.
Well, just again, using me as an example, or, someone that would have reached out to you in my youth, what would you have encouraged me to eat or to consume or to drink, tying it back to nutrition? What would you have recommended me to do with my heavy bleeding, long cycle? My cycle is usually 34 to 36 days versus your normal 32. And then again, just excruciating cramps, like blackout cramps is what I had. Like, I don't know if my pain tolerance is low or something like that, but I remember like legit fainting at home or
that's not a low pain tolerance.
Okay.
If you're fainting, that's a clear sign that something is not okay.
Yeah. I always was like, something's wrong. And the solution when I went to a medical provider was, well, just get on birth control.
Of course.
Yeah. And it was really frustrating because I was like, I don't think this is normal. I don't think this is like okay. And so I would dread when my cycle came, and I would lose in a month. I would lose like 3 days out of work, out of school. It was very debilitating. But what would you have suggested to someone like me in that phase of my life?
Yeah. So first of all, I'm sorry that you went through that, because I know it can be very frustrating and difficult and disheartening.
Yeah.
So specifically for those really painful periods, that could be an excess of prostaglandins, which are these compounds that you naturally need, because this is what helps your uterus contract and constrict to help to release the blood. But when you have too much of those, it can cause a lot of cramping, and those that can move into other places in your pelvis. So you can also experience those period poops that I'm sure we all know and love, but don't want to say that we have, because those prostaglandins can have that similar effect of the cramping onto, our bowels and such. So with that, a lot of people have gotten a lot of relief from limiting red meat and dairy, especially closer to their periods, because that has been shown to increase prostaglandins. And then also we really want to lower the inflammation. So supporting your liver, allowing for these hormones to be metabolized and eliminated from the body. So encouraging your liver, also using circulatory aids. So ginger can be super helpful with that because it allows for your blood to flow a lot better and allows for it to actually, those compounds that are causing it and the imbalance of hormones and the inflammation, that allows it to be released from the body. And that can be super helpful. And then my favorite thing, and if I know, because I've been traveling for a while or whatever it was, that my period might hurt a little bit more this month, raspberry leaf tea is an absolute game changer.
Whoa. Have not heard about
Absolute game changer. So raspberry leaf tea is a uterine tonic. So it helps to strengthen the uterus, and it helps so much with cramping. And I also, so in probably the 3 to 5 days leading up to my period, I do it all the time now just because, I never want to have cramps, and it's a way to phase sync and all of that.
Yeah.
So in the few days leading up to my period and the 2 days that I start it, I make a tea of raspberry leaf tea with nettle tea or nettle leaves and ginger. And it is incredible. Drink a few cups of that a day. Obviously, check the healthcare professional if those are right for you. But these really, really help for the cramp reduction and total game changer. So nettle leaf is a great kind of cleanser, diuretic. It helps to release that water retention also, and can be really, really helpful with that. And then, like I said, the ginger for that circulatory aid. And that tea concoction is a game changer.
Whoa. I've never been told that all my life. Drink a tea. You can totally do instead of consuming handfuls of ibuprofen is what I was doing.
Absolutely. And handfuls of ibuprofen really can harm your liver.
Yes.
And make your cramps worse, because we need our livers to help us detox and to remove excess hormones. So yeah. Natural solutions are incredible.
And I found that putting a hot pack on my stomach, really helped. I don't know if that's just a psychological thing, but what is your opinion of that?
You're easing the muscle. So of course it definitely helps.
Okay.
I like to kind of kick that in the butt before it gets there.
Sure.
Yeah. Another thing that I would highly, highly recommend is Epsom salt baths and magnesium. Magnesium, especially for cramps, is incredible. I think about 50% of the US population is deficient in magnesium. So it is super necessary. It has over 300 metabolic reactions in the body. And one of those functions of magnesium is to help as a nerve tranquilizer and muscle relaxant. So magnesium is essential. And Epsom salt baths the magnesium can be absorbed through the skin. So that can really help.
Okay. I am totally going to try that out. Raspberry leaf tea and what was the second one? Nettle?
Yeah, raspberry, nettle, and
ginger.
Ginger.
Ginger is so cool.
Oh, incredible.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Growing up in an Asian family, put ginger in everything. So ginger is always available. What would you suggest someone like me to do after my period? What types of food should I be consuming then?
Yeah. So I will say also, so during your period, you have to support your body during that time too. And, the average woman will lose about 2 milligrams of iron per day of their bleed. You were likely losing a lot more than that because you had a really heavy bleed, and you're losing other minerals and your body's working really hard. So it's really, really important to take it easy. First of all, don't put added stress on your body, but you really want to be replenishing those nutrients, and especially the minerals, magnesium, iron. Iron is super, super important. That's where you likely will get the fatigue from as well. And also iron deficiencies are a huge issue globally, really.
Yeah, I was anemic.
And especially for women.
Yeah, I was anemic when I was younger. And they were like, you need to eat red meat cooked in an cast iron.
Cast iron skillet.
Yeah, cast iron skillet during my period. And I was like, okay, but I can only consume so much red meat,
Totally. There's also red meat might increase the prostaglandins that could be harming it. So I definitely say go for it, eat red meat. I would just say limit it and try to get an organic and grass-fed, because it can be inflammatory otherwise. So also a huge thing is avoid caffeine on your period. So not
Okay.
only can caffeine be dehydrating and it can get you a little bit anxious, but it also inhibits the absorption of iron. So as we're losing all of this iron, we want to be able to absorb as much of it as possible.
Mhm.
So try to avoid caffeine and alcohol, and then increase vitamin C, because that really helps your body absorb the iron. And then after your period, if we wanted to go into that,
Yeah.
so that's your follicular phase. So directly following your menstrual phase is your follicular phase. And during this time, there's follicles in your ovaries that house eggs. And at about day 3 of your cycle, a hormone will stimulate a few of those egg follicles to develop, but only one will be the dominant follicle that continues to develop throughout the follicular phase. And that is what starts to produce estrogen. And that growing follicle starts to produce estrogen. And as it reaches its maturity, it really peaks with your estrogen. So estrogen is a dominant hormone at that time. And like I said, later on with PMS, that balance of estrogen and progesterone is really important. So you really want to support your body in this phase by helping the regulation of estrogen. So helping to support the estrogen production, but also helping to metabolize and eliminate that excess estrogen that you might have, right? Because we don't want it in the later phases. So things that can really help with that are cruciferous vegetables. So broccoli, cauliflower, arugula, those ones are incredible for this phase. And yeah, we still want to be replenishing those minerals that we might have lost throughout our period. And, during this time, our digestive system is also working a little bit better and can tolerate more of like the raw foods that might be a little bit harder to digest in other phases. So you really, really want to kind of look at it in that perspective too, of like, how can your body really be able to digest and absorb all these nutrients that you're feeding it. The other thing that's great for this phase is probiotics. So your gut microbiome plays a huge role in estrogen metabolism and regulation. So making sure that you're getting in those probiotics. So yogurts, sauerkraut, stuff like that can be super, super helpful. And then after your follicular phase, you enter into your ovulatory phase. And for phase syncing purposes, we like to look at the ovulatory phase being the few days before ovulation and the few days after ovulation, right? And your hormones can actually fluctuate between 3 and 50% daily during and around ovulation. So that's actually the peak event in our cycle. And if you're not ovulating, you're not having a true menstrual cycle. So it's really, really important that we really help support our body so that we're ovulating. And during this phase, like I said, your hormones are at their peaks, and that is really when we need to support that estrogen metabolism. And one of the ways that our body gets rid of excess estrogen is through the liver. So it's great to really support the liver during that time. Onions and garlic can really help with that. They contain sulfur-containing compounds that are amazing. Turmeric really helps with the inflammation.
I love turmeric.
Herbs and roots and things that are often like disregarded as like not real food. They're just add-ons.
Yeah.
A lot of these have the most beneficial properties. And if you make a dressing with a whole bunch of herbs and some ginger and some turmeric, drizzle that on everything. That's like, you're getting so much nutrients in that.
Just blanket in everything.
Oh, I do.
Yeah. Thank you for going over these phases in our cycle and encouraging us to really hone in on food and things that we consume and how it directly connects to how our body absorbs things, how our body puts out things. I mean, like that's really important.
I didn't go through the last phase though. So if you want me to go through the last phase.
Yes, please.
Sure. So after ovulation, that follicle that once housed the egg becomes what's called the corpus luteum and begins to produce progesterone. And progesterone is the dominant hormone in our luteal phase. And progesterone has incredible benefits. It's very relaxing. It helps to support the balance of estrogen and progesterone in the body, which, impacts your bone, impacts your skin, your hair, everything really. So it's great to support progesterone production during this time. Vitamin E is great for that, zinc and different minerals. And again, I would say, especially during this phase, to first of all, your metabolism increases. So it's really important that you are actually nourishing your body and getting enough calories, because calorie restriction at this time can cause some negative symptoms and also lead to binging. So we really want to support our bodies by feeding it and actually nourishing it and giving enough nutrients that it needs. And yeah, so this phase is really incredible, and it's great to know what type of PMS you're prone to as well, so that you can start to prepare for that and get in those extra B vitamins. Your hormones have a direct effect on your serotonin levels. So adding in mood boosting amino acids like L-tryptophan that's a precursor for serotonin. And you can find that in pumpkin seeds and turkey and peanuts. And, it might seem like a lot at first, but it's a great way to really help support your body in a way that doesn't feel restrictive. And I feel like so many of the quote unquote diets that we're all used to focus on taking things out. And instead, this focus is on adding in certain nutrients during each phase to really help support it.
What are your thoughts on intermittent fasting? I've heard so many conflicting. Yeah, I've heard so many conflicting things about that, because I'm insulin resistant, and that has contributed to my infertility. And so I've been told by medical professionals that, like, okay, you need to do intermittent fasting to balance out that insulin resistant situation. But then I've heard, okay, intermittent fasting is not good for your hormones, and hormones are so directly connected to ovulation and fertility and all of that stuff. So what's your opinion about that?
Good question. So one of the things that needs to be said is a lot of the information that we're getting on intermittent fasting is through research done on men and postmenopausal women, and don't take women's hormones into effect or into account. So the way that intermittent fasting is kind of touted as this, I think it's like the 8-16 split. So fasting for 16 hours, only consuming food for 8 hours. And that can be really detrimental for our hormones. And also a lot of the ways that people will do it is that they wait until later in the day to start eating. And that can have a negative effect too. So if we're waiting too late, then, that's causing excess stress in our body, and stress is a biological reaction. That's excess cortisol. And that can really negatively affect our hormones, because our bodies are going to prioritize making cortisol over our reproductive hormones. And in which case that can directly affect your fertility, because you might lose your cycle. Your hormones might not be able to be at sufficient levels. So I would recommend, if you are going to do some type of intermittent fasting, you can do it based on what phases you're in. So for instance, the follicular phase could be a little bit better for a more extended fast. I wouldn't go over anything over about 14 hours. 14, 16 hours would be the definite max, and eat earlier in the day rather than late. And don't drink coffee on an empty stomach. That's a massive one. Do not drink coffee on an empty stomach, please.
Oh, okay.
I know, I'm sorry. Just have something in your system before. Because again, that can really help. That really can spike our cortisol levels. And, if we have too much cortisol, we're not going to be nourishing our reproductive hormones. And then that can also have a lot of other sorts of negative effects. So for instance, those with PCOS are often told just lose weight and it'll help your PCOS.
Yep.
But the issue there is that PCOS is really difficult to lose weight. Like when you have PCOS, it's much more difficult to lose weight.
Yep.
And so you're going on these massive diets and calorie restrictions and over exercising, which is then wreaking absolute havoc on your hormones, and therefore increasing the PCOS symptoms and making everything worse. So I would say that. And then also in the luteal phase, because you need more calories and we need more nutrients, and our metabolisms are faster, I wouldn't suggest doing much intermittent fasting during that time. So I do suggest that you don't eat anything about 2 hours before you go to sleep, because that can kind of that can disrupt your sleep. And of course, sleep is really important for hormonal health. And, so it ends up being about a 12 to 14 hour fasting window, a 10 to 12 hour eating window. And that's usually a good place to stick in for our hormones. And, we're always kind of intermittent fasting. We sleep through the night and don't eat. So,
right.
So it's an interesting concept, but those really drastic intermittent fasting that helps, especially a lot of men, can be very detrimental to our hormones. And you may end up either getting quicker results, but then having a lot more issues long-term, or B, you end up getting way worse symptoms. And then you get really frustrated that you just tried these things and you're like starving yourself and you're irritable and already. And then you also are significantly negatively affecting your hormones that are making things worse.
Yeah, it's so interesting because intermittent fasting obviously is not for everyone, but it's been in social media and in our world today as the new fad. I feel like it's like the new thing that everyone should be trying. And it's like so frustrating to watch my husband like drop weight. Like it's no big deal. And he's able to go much longer than I am. And I'm getting like hangry. It's like,
absolutely,
I just want to eat freaking fruit. Like, is that okay? And it's like, no, I can't. And then the only thing I can consume in the morning is coffee on an empty stomach. So it's so frustrating. It's so frustrating because it's like, why does it work for you? And it doesn't work for me. And then you're right. It does. In the beginning, I was losing a ton of weight and it was like, oh gosh, it's working. And then it plateaus, completely plateaus. It doesn't work anymore. And then you're being told, okay, well then fast even more hours.
Yeah.
But then I was doing a video the other day and I was like having to read a script and I couldn't concentrate because I was starving. And
absolutely.
It's like so frustrating. So thank you for your opinion about intermittent fasting.
Yeah, well, I think we have to, like we said at the beginning of this conversation, we're not taught about our cycles. And unfortunately, there's not much research done or focused on our cycles. And a lot of the typical wellness, fitness, nutrition, et cetera, all of that information that most of us are consuming are done with disregard to our hormones. And our hormones are what is going to affect, how we store fat and our metabolism and our digestion and, how our insulin. And it's so important to focus on your hormones if you have them. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I just think about how much we focus on when you become pregnant. You have like a giant list of things you can eat, things you can't eat, things that you should stay away from, all of that stuff. But before that, no one talks about these phases and what you can do to boost certain hormones or, supplement certain things. And it's like, why have we been talking about this? It's not like endometriosis or PCOS or infertility is a new thing for women. It's always been here. And yet we're just now peeling back the layers of that conversation. And so thank you so much for being such an advocate for those of us who are trying to navigate this very complex world of our hormones. But that complexity is not a negative thing. That complexity needs to be viewed as like it's complex because it's awesome. And because that's why we're these amazing, complicated creatures that have these superpowers that just need to be tapped into. And I think you're doing that so beautifully in the work that you're doing with women. So thank you so much for doing what you're doing.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. And I love it because it does seem like a lot at first. And I know when I do a lot of first contact conversations that, people don't know anything, or this is the first time you're listening to a podcast that we're talking about menstrual health and the first time you're hearing it, it can seem like so much, and it can seem really overwhelming and the rest of it. But we have, like I said, 451 cycles. It's affecting us all the time.
Yeah.
And what's really incredible with it is that once you start to simply notice it
Mm-hmm.
it starts to become second nature.
Mm-hmm.
And, within just a few cycles, like if you think back 3 months ago, you'd probably be like, what? That was New Year's, it seemed like it was yesterday.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like it goes by so quickly. So if every week or every cycle, you're just like, okay, what can I incorporate this cycle to help me learn more? So, take one cycle, start to just track your periods, start to track your patterns, what you're noticing, all that kind of stuff. And then in the next cycle, be like, okay, let's do some phase-based nutrition. So, go to the grocery store, you've just tracked one cycle. You can gauge where you are in your cycle now. So go to the grocery store with a list and pick out 5 foods that helps support that phase, and just consume that throughout the week. And then the next, so there's small things that you can do that end up really stacking upon each other, and then it just becomes absolute second nature, and you're so on top of it because it is us. Our hormones are affecting every aspect of us, from the way that we look, the way that we feel, the way that we think, the way that we perceive the world and ourselves. There was a study that showed that at certain phases, you actually perceive yourself differently. So if you just start to notice this, you recognize that it's really you, and when you're able to connect to that, you understand yourself so much better, and it just becomes so intuitive. And I think as women, we're just already really intuitive, a lot of us. And this is such a cool way to truly feel connected to yourself and support yourself in incredible ways.
Well, it's an investment. If we really,
totally.
if we really want to be our best selves, if we really want to give back to our communities, give back to our families, this is something we could do, just tweaking little things here and there to invest in ourselves.
Absolutely.
And I think that's what your main message is. Like, if you're this amazing, awesome person, which you are, every one of us are, then why are we not investing in ourselves? And we owe it to ourselves to put out that type of energy, to put out that type of vibe to our world, and not
absolutely,
and not just put Band-Aids over. And I think, as women, we're such giving creatures that we forget and get lost in the mix of like, I can do this little thing for myself, and it's not selfish. It's an investment.
Absolutely. And the return on investment is wild.
Yeah.
And you can think about it in so many different facets. So let's say you invest in a course or whatever it is, I can plug myself, or invest in working with a practitioner financially.
Yes.
Right. You told me that you were out of commission for 3 days of the month. How is that affecting you financially? Because, you're not able to go to work, you're, whatever else it is. So financially, if you're helping that, you're gaining money. Right. Then time-wise, you're gaining time because you're not suffering.
Right.
You're not going through days that you're genuinely suffering and you just want to crawl into bed and losing time, under the covers, not wanting to get up. You then are getting that return on investment so much more. The energy levels that you have, the ease, hopefully with fertility, if that's your choice, or to, play with your kids or play with your nieces and nephews or your friends and just like enjoy life. That return on investment is huge.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you, Nicole, for reminding us that it's something we all should strive for. And as women, I think we need to hear it from more and more women, that it's not selfish of us to think of ourselves as these complex beings that can produce more. We can even be more effective when we invest in ourselves. And so thank you for that constant reminder. And folks, please check out Nicole and her website. What's your website, Nicole?
thesyncSociety.com.
Perfect. And we'll have that in our description of our podcast. And again, as you can tell, she's just a wealth of knowledge. Would you be open to people just, messaging you?
Email me. I have also a free masterclass that can walk you through the hormones, the different types of PMS and your cycle. So if you're a more visual person, that can be really beneficial too.
Awesome.
And totally free. And feel free to email me, message me, anything.
Yeah, she's very accessible, folks. Like, it's been our pleasure working with her and just reaching out. And it's like, can you jump on this podcast really quick and just be awesome? Yes. Even when I'm in Spain. Please reach out to Nicole if you have any more questions, or, like I said, invest in yourselves to be your best selves in the long run, and how we can sustain that. So thank you so much for your time, Nicole. It's always so wonderful talking to you.
Of course. Thank you for having me.
Yeah. For more information about 3W, please visit our website at 3wmedical.org. That's the number 3, the letter W, medical.org. From there, you can learn more information about the services we provide, book an appointment, or make a donation if you'd like to support our mission. You can also call our office at 206-588-0311. That's 206-588-0311. If you like this episode, please share it with others and consider subscribing on your favorite podcast platform so you never miss an episode. Thank you so much for listening, and until next time, stay healthy and be well.